Hello, warrior friends. Welcome back to another episode of The Invisible Diaries. We're your hosts. I'm Misty.
And I'm Amber. And today we have a really special guest, a cancer thriver and super talented voiceover actress, Kat Cressida.
As always, a quick disclaimer, any information discussed in this podcast is strictly our opinion and for informational purposes only. It is not meant as medical advice and should not be taken that way. Always consult with your doctor or medical team.
We know battling chronic illness can be hard, and if you find yourself or someone you love in crisis and need someone to talk to, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, which provides free and confidential support in the US 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, that number is 1-800-273-TALK. If you prefer to text, you can also access help by texting the crisis text line at 741-741. Now, let's get started.
We are super excited to have Kat Cressida. She's an internationally recognized voiceover artist. She's a top artist in the industry. She's performed characters for Walt Disney Animations, Pixar Animations, Cartoon Network, top sports networks, TV campaigns, and commercials.
You guys might be wondering how Kat and the Invisible Diaries got hooked up. There's a really great TED Talk that she's going to go into and discuss with everybody, but she has an invisible illness of her own. And so we wanted to kind of give her a platform to share with you guys so you guys could hear her story.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, hi,
Say hello.
I'm Kat Cressida. It's nice to meet everybody out there.
Yay!
Feeling well and somewhat safe in this crazy atmosphere right now.
So we wanted to discuss your official diagnosis. So if you could share with us your diagnosis, walk us through the process of discovering that something was wrong and how you got diagnosed.
Sure. So thanks again for you guys having me on, and grateful that something like this exists. It's so lovely to see support communities like this out there. Is my volume okay?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, so I don't need to project any more than this?
You're good.
Okay,
Sounds
great.
good.
So back in, kind of started in 2011, 2012. During that time, I was noticing that there was something going on behind my jaw because I do so much work with my mouth and voiceover. You're doing a lot of manipulation of your jaw area. I started to notice that something was off. Asked my doctor, sent me to a specialist. It kind of got, as I call it, poo-pooed. It got sort of minimalized, marginalized as you're just being sensitive. You know, everybody's got a little bit of something. They would feel it and say, yeah, it's like a little cyst or something. I wouldn't worry about it. And it kind of persisted where it felt like it was getting more, it was impacting the back of the jaw a little bit more and more. And so in 2012, I finally went to someone who was supposed to be a top-notch specialist associated with UCLA. And he specialized in ear, nose, and throat, so pretty much everything up. And he was, again, very, very, a lot of humor, a lot of joviality. In LA, you find a lot of people who, you know, really put on the personality. And I was very concerned, and he kept sort of joking with me, saying, I think you're, you know, it's good to be concerned, but I think you're over concerned, and I'm not really sensing anything that would alarm me, but if you really want to go get an MRI, I'll write the test for the MRI. The overall feeling was that I was sort of being an inconvenience, or that I was over dramatizing, and that I should be, you know, just relaxing and enjoying life and not be concerned about this. So again, a lot of this stuff, a lot of what I've learned in hindsight, had I had all the lessons, you know, that I now have, like everything else in life, I would have handled things a lot differently and spoken up a lot more aggressively. But back then, I never faced anything quite like this. And so just was sort of trusting the specialists, the people with all the degrees. And in my story, all of the specialists and doctors and surgeons all happened to be male. So that plays a little bit into some of what went on as my story sort of progresses. You'll probably get that gist too. So went for the MRI. Just as I was signing out, heading out to the bright Santa Monica sunshine, I got flagged and called back in, which has never happened to me in all my life, and got escorted to the back room where the doctor on duty, there's always a doctor on duty for exactly this reason, was looking at my MRI and had some concerns. And so it was that scary moment that we all see in a movie or read in a book or a magazine article where the doctor says, "You see that little mass up there? I'm kind of concerned about that." And of course, immediately, I said, "Is it cancer?" And he said, "Well, it's way too early to know anything, but I am concerned about it. So I would, I'm going to call over to your surgeon's office, and my recommendation is that you really look into it." That's all they're allowed to do. They're not your doctor. So all they can say is really, this is of some concern, and to flag it. Went back to the specialist, and the specialist again said, "Oh, these MRI, places, they're always looking for something. If I were a betting man, I'd bet all my money in Vegas that this is going to be nothing." And I wanted a biopsy. So again, with some reluctance on his part, we scheduled what was basically going to be a fluid biopsy, where they just sort of stick a needle in and extract it that way. And we couldn't even, the needle couldn't get in there. It was an excruciatingly painful 45 minutes with, trying to get the biopsy, because it was, whatever was in there was so thick and hardened that they couldn't penetrate the needle into it. And that was terrifying, because they kept saying they've never seen anything like that. So as soon as you start getting that message, that's a scary one. Went back to the surgeon, who again said, I really don't think that there's a reason to be concerned. And that was the first time in the story that I put my foot down and said, "I want to get a proper biopsy. I want you to cut into it, and I want you to get enough of it so that we can get it properly tested." And that's when the surgeon said to me, "Well, I would hate to mar your pretty little face with a scar. So why don't you think about it?" And I said, "I don't want to think about it. I want to get a biopsy." And I think in hindsight, it's probably fair for all of us to say, had I been a male, that probably wouldn't have been what would have come out of the doctor's mouth. So that was not appropriate, and is part of the story. Part of my keynote speaking, so to speak, is that if you know that something's up and you feel like it is, don't let anybody sway you or intimidate you or try to marginalize what's going on. And I want to make sure, that the male doctors out there are aware. This is before the Me Too movement. I don't know if that statement would have come out had we now been in current times, but to anybody who's out there who may be a doctor, or who may be going to see a male doctor or female doctor, don't let them marginalize you or make a statement like that and leave it at that. It's your life. And fortunately I didn't, because about 2 weeks later, I got that terrifying phone call back that the doctor needed to see me immediately. And they wouldn't tell me on the phone anything, which of course, means that it's bad news. So that's when I got called in to get told that it was this terrifying, usually fatal form of sarcoma that most likely had breached my facial nerve, and that if it hadn't already done so, it was about to do so shortly, and I would most likely never speak again if I had the proper life-saving surgery, and that I would be permanently scarred and deformed. So that was all in 2012, that all went down very quickly in the summer once I had insisted on a proper biopsy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So I do have a quick question. What was his tone like when he had to tell you this? I'm just curious, if his tone changed. At first he was dismissive. Wow.
It was like all of a sudden I was getting the death toll, and now it was very, very serious. There's another part to that story. I have yet to go on record with his name, but he attached himself to my surgery because it was such a rare, never before seen in a female my age, never before documented in this part of the face or this part of the body. He attached himself to my surgery and sent me off to go find my own specialist. Now that I know more, I know that none of that should have happened that way. If he was entitled to be a part of the surgery, it was his job to find the specialist and pull together the team. And it took another surgeon basically saying, why is this doctor attached? Why is he attached to the surgery? Because he has no specialty in this, nor will he serve any purpose whatsoever. And that was mind-blowing to learn that I was basically being taken advantage of and used so that he could be a part of a, new experimental kind of surgery. So, and this is in Los Angeles, where there's supposed to be a very, very high standard in terms of the practitioners and the surgeons. So my gut feeling from all this is, if it's happening here, it's most likely happening in other regions as well. And it's something for every patient to be aware of, that if you get a serious diagnosis, the person who diagnoses you is supposed to be helpful in terms of getting you to a specialist, and they should not be attaching themselves to the surgery unless there's an actual reason for them to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
Things that, nobody gives you the manual for when you're young and carefree and don't have a reason to discover this stuff.
Well, it's absolutely one of the reasons that we started this platform, is because we have the majority, obviously statistically, invisible illnesses, autoimmune diseases, even some cancers primarily affect women, with the majority. And we talk about it a lot on this channel about medical gaslighting. And so knowing what you know now, what's one of the biggest things that you have learned as far as being your own advocate? Because that's something we talk about a lot with our listeners.
I think I just said it.
Absolutely.
Is there
No, I wasn't sure if there's anything else you want to share about your journey as far as what you've learned with that advocacy side. Do you go ahead and take it into your own hands and find that specialist on your own? Do you lean on, on a different kind of network? Or?
Well, as I said, if a specialist is telling you that you need to have this surgery and that they're going to be a part of it, it's their job to pull together the specialists. And if they can't do that, then they clearly have no business being a part of it, because that Absolutely. Is part of, if they want to, get the tremendous chunk of money they would get for being a part of it, if they want the accolades or the experience of being a part of it, if they serve a purpose to being a part of it, then their job is to pull together the team, not to send you off on your own. And because I was sent off on my own with zero support or guidance, other than here's one surgeon at UCLA who I now refer to as Dr. Frankenstein, because his way of handling it was to sever different parts of my body that would take me 2 to 3 years to recover from, to fix this. I was misdiagnosed several rounds. I was basically thrown out there to the wide world of people who didn't really understand this very rare form of sarcoma, and was given everything from a very kind, compassionate, I don't want to be the surgeon to work on this because I don't have the confidence that I can do it without severing your facial nerve. And just to clarify for those who don't know this, the facial nerve is a very rare, unique, special kind of nerve. Once it's severed or even nicked, it's destroyed. It doesn't ever heal. It can't, they have yet, at least in terms of my knowledge, have yet to have a procedure to be able to mend it. And it's responsible for all the movement in your face. So once it's nicked or severed, even in the slightest, you lose some amount of mobility, if not all. And it's commonly seen, of course, in stroke victims, where their face is completely paralyzed on one side or both sides. And it's horrific for anybody who likes to speak or move their face, which I assume is most people. It's a terrifying diagnosis, and Absolutely. There's no recovery from it. So I was being told at a very young age, doing what I do for a living, that I would, if I had the surgery to save my life, I would most likely never move my face again, and therefore never be able to speak again. So I was given every diagnosis from, I don't want to touch it because I'm afraid that I don't have the experience to get in there, how far back it is. And as unknowable as it is, they couldn't get a clean shot of it from any tests because it was so deeply back behind my jaw, underneath my brain skull cavity. So I got that all the way up to, well, there's no point in operating because this is fatal.
Wow.
You have, you know, maybe 6 months to a year to a few years to live. And being delivered to me as if someone were saying, yeah, you've got a slight bruise. It'll take about a month to heal. It was really
Wow.
a terrifying journey that I would not wish on anybody. So,
So you had I know you had a 10-hour surgery, which was very dangerous and it required several follow-up procedures.
yeah.
What were the struggles of having all of those treatments, and how did you keep your head up throughout this process?
Literally and figuratively. Well, one of the things that was my unfortunate discovery journey through all this is there's so much that's not shared with you, both because the surgeons don't necessarily know how the body will react if it's a rare, unprecedented kind of procedure. I think my surgeon, again, and this is all in hindsight, and he's a miracle worker, and he was the only one who optimistically, in the 3 to 4 months I was just, you know, flinging myself about, both from LA to New York, trying to find a surgeon who both would take it on and seem like they could recover everything or do their best job to recover everything, keep everything intact while removing the sarcoma, the tumor. I think he was walking a fine line between keeping my hopes up and keeping me positive, and sharing information that could be damaging to that, and also him not necessarily knowing. And we definitely have had words since then, because my takeaway from, you know, being 7 years fully out of it and being lucky enough to be where I am now, which is a tremendous miracle, all things considered, I feel like I should have been given more awareness of what I could possibly face, because it's on those walls and not know what's coming up in front of you. So to answer your question, there were several things that happened along the way. The first was the first round, you know, coming out of the 10-hour surgery, where I was told that it was the A result. We had an A, B, and a C. A meant that they got in there, they got the sarcoma, and eventually everything would be healed properly, and I would most likely look like myself eventually again, or close to myself again, and have full use of my voice and face again, with some rehabilitation and speech therapy. So that was the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, we went to a B version, which meant they had to remove arteries from other parts of the body to get, you know, to fix the artery here and to repair it, and that the grafted skin required more taking from other parts of the body than where they initially thought, which was the back of the neck. And that B version would require a much longer healing curve. So it could be a year, 1.5 to 2 years before I could use an arm again or a leg again. And that was like, you know, still a pretty good, it's considered a good diagnosis, because I would be whole, have use of everything. It would just take longer to heal. And then the C version was that they saved my life by removing the sarcoma, but that I would never speak again and be permanently disfigured. The D version we never really spoke about, but D, of course, was for death. And that was also always, you know, unfortunately a possibility going in for such a long surgery. So coming out of it, I was told it would just be 3 to 4 weeks of hard healing. That's what the term was, which meant, you know, after that would be pretty much good to go, is what he kept saying. And it was nothing like that. It was a devastating, very traumatizing, at least 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of things went wrong. A lot of things went sideways. There were a lot of complications. Body not reacting the way it was supposed to, face not reacting the way it was supposed to. I was very, deformed is absolutely accurate. Everything was swollen out to several times its size, particularly this side where all of the sharp instruments were for several hours. Again, something that nobody had told me about, and that I think most people don't know about, is when you do that amount of surgery to the skull area, to all of the protective glands and fluids and nerves that surround this whole area. The face is the most complex part of the body. There's just so many moving parts, and it's all of our senses pretty much, except for touch, are through our face, you know, and our ability to speak and smell and taste and eat and hear and everything. So there's a lot of protective softwares built into this whole part of the body that got compromised for the long haul. And it took several months for the swelling to go down. This eye was completely sealed shut. This eye was sagging like a bad, you know, like as if I'd had a stroke. A lot of complications to this area. Do you need me to adjust something? Because I'm seeing that you're adjusting something.
You're good.
Okay.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Good.
Cool.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a hell of a journey. And I, again, would not wish it on anybody. And I would hope that surgeons and patients alike enter into more of a clear dialogue about what they may face, so that at least if you wake up in the middle of the night with something terrifying, some new development, that at least it was on the grid in terms of some understanding. Because when these things are just flying at you left and right, really terrifying things. At one point I woke up in the middle of the night and I literally was covered head to toe in what looked like the mumps or the measles.
Wow.
I had no idea what it was. It turns out that it was an overnight instant bad reaction to some new slight medication that had been introduced. And nothing that I'd ever been, you know, had reason to believe that I was allergic to before. And it didn't look like, I mean, I've had allergic reactions from time to time. I'm slightly allergic to penicillin and Cillins, but this was bad. I mean, I literally woke up looking like I had some plague on me. And in the middle of the nights when you usually can't get a doctor on the line immediately. So, you know, you're just in terror for about 6 or 7 hours before someone gets back to you and tells you it's probably just an allergic reaction, and they'll, you know, get something to you immediately.
Scary.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
With your platform, we know you have an amazing career going on as a voiceover actress, but you also obviously have a very clear passion about this medical advocacy, this side of things. So is there anything else that you want our listeners to know? I mean, obviously you've touched on an incredible amount, and your story is incredible, almost unbelievable. As many of us know, many of our listeners know, they have something similar with just feeling not validated and terrified, and it being just a long road of uncertainty. So with your platform, what's your biggest contribution that you're wanting to give for everybody, you know, to everybody?
I guess, I mean, I joke about this sometimes. We're working, you know, there's a book in the works right now, and I'm very clear on the fact that I wouldn't presume to believe that I have life lessons, or that I certainly am not someone who would ever presume to tell someone what they should or shouldn't be doing. There's a lot of messaging out there like that I instinctively pull back from, because I don't think anybody knows what's best for anybody, unless they're a certified psychologist or therapist or special, you know, doctor specialist. I've had to learn that even the specialists don't necessarily know a lot when it comes to the roads that we have to travel. I think I've already touched upon it, which is to just say that it's really important that if you have a gut instinct, well, first of all, I would say there's so many cultures within the United States that don't want to talk about uncomfortable things, that don't want to address their own discomforts. That's just the nature of a lot of the cultures within the United States. And I say cultures because there are all different upbringings, and it's such a, you know, to use the cliche, we're such a melting pot. But what that really means is, even though we're all alike, and certainly this time is teaching us that we are all human beings, and that we're nothing compared to Mother Nature. Yet again, we're being reminded that we are guests of this gorgeous planet and not landlords. But for our own bodies, we are landlords. And for our own self, we are the only person, the only soul really, who's ever going to care as much about our own life as we are. It's wonderful to have a spouse or a partner or a family. They love you very much. They care about you very much. But instinctually, we have to be very focused on our own health and well-being. And for people who put all their focus on someone else, they're most likely then not paying attention to what they should be for themselves. And we, of course, we all know that, how that can play into relationships and our own health and well-being. So that's my biggest reminder first, is that really check in with yourself. And if something's not feeling right, as uncomfortable or terrifying or scary as it may feel, to look into it and investigate it. It's so important that one try to take the baby steps to getting the help that you may need. And I've heard every version from every, you know, I have a lot of friends. LA is a culture, just like there's a lot of cultures around the United States that would rather enjoy life and focus on the positive, which is lovely, and focus on, and focus away from the negative, which is understandable and human, but it's very important not to do that, especially if it's your health and your well-being, whether it's mental or physical. And I keep encountering people every day who, when they hear my story, will jokingly say, God, maybe I really should get that toothache looked into, or maybe I really should get that lump, you know, here or there looked into. But they joke and they laugh it away because they don't want to face anything like what I've been through. And I understand it. And odds are they never will. I was fortunately raised in a culture where health was of key importance. And we may have erred on the side of maybe too much concern about the little things, but better to have that laughed off and be proven wrong and reassured and move on than to be in the dark for enough years where then the only thing you hear back is, I wish you'd gotten into this earlier. And I had family members where that was the prognosis. The diagnosis was, if they had gone 2 years earlier, they would be much healthier or alive today. And so I can't plead enough with people and hope that they are addressing whatever it is, as uncomfortable and scary as that is. And I still get scared going in for tests. I mean, I don't want anything close to what I went through again, but at least I know that there's a way through it. And fortunately, if you do speak up for yourself and push for those things, you have a lot better shot at coming out of it healthy and able to live life again. Yeah, you raise your odds significantly, obviously, if you try to face it.
I love that you acknowledged not just focusing on the positive only, because sometimes when you do notice something that could be negative in your life and addressing it, I think that's like such a great point to make, as well as, you know, being an advocate for yourself. And we're so thankful that you're sharing your story, because it's a hard thing to share and it's a hard topic to discuss. But, you know, when you're saying how the doctors don't really share with you what to expect, when people hear a story like yours, it kind of gives them a little insight on what they can expect, or inspire them to get something checked out. So we're very thankful that you came on our show.
No, I'm very grateful again that you guys, you know, have this platform. And I know that anybody who's watching this most likely is struggling with something that, or they have somebody they love who's struggling with something. Communication is such an overused word. You know, we need to communicate better. We should have better communication, but it's still underutilized so often. I see it every day. There's not enough communication in terms of things that are important, whether it's a relationship or one's health or one's situation. It's unique to be having this dialogue too, while all of this is going on with the world. The people I work with, we sometimes joke, you know, just to put a little bit of levity in the situation, that everybody's version of quarantine right now, as upsetting as it is. And certainly there are people, which I want to acknowledge, who it's not just quarantine, they're dealing with deaths, you know, deaths in the family, deaths of loved ones, people who are ill. So I certainly know that there's no joking matter about the quarantine, even though there's so much levity going on about it to help people cope with it. Right, the most part is nothing close to the kind of quarantine that I went through, where it was in a great deal of pain and disfigured and not really knowing from day to day what the next day was going to be in terms of all this. And not even knowing if I would have a career to go back to once my body normalized. There were so many ifs and unknowns that for me right now, when people are joking, you know, I think there was an adorable promo on the TV. I'm looking over there because that's where my TV. There was a really funny promo on, someone's got like a quarantine talk show now, a stay-at-home, you know, and there's so much funny stuff coming out now to help people just deal with it and laugh through it and have a sense of humor about it, which is very healing too. But he made some sort of a joke about, you know, today I really mixed things up and I moved from my couch to my chair, you know, try mixing it up. And that is really funny, and I laughed. But my version of quarantine, it was not, you know, gee, what movie am I going to put on today, or how will I take care of the kids and entertain them and keep them occupied today? It was a real quarantine. So to everybody out there who's feeling frustrated right now, I know it sucks, and I'm going stir crazy too. I just finally got back everything. So to be locked back up again is frustrating, but it's just know how lucky you are to be breathing the oxygen. If you are at all, you know, have manageable pain, just to be there where you are right now. I hope I'm not coming off like Pollyanna. It's more to just reassure people that what we're dealing with right now, if all you're dealing with is the quarantine and a temporary, unfortunate loss of employment, which I think all of us are facing some version of in one way or another, that you're not there. It's not really that scary health quarantine. Which fortunately I don't think we're going to be facing if we manage to keep containing it. I guess I just wanted to address the elephant in the room, because we're doing this right in the middle of this crazy new culture. But I would open it up to you and ask, do you guys have any specific questions about my journey? Because I'm an open book and very transparent about it. I don't want people to feel alone in what they're going through.
Well, how can people find you? So if someone's listening or watching this and they're like, they want to reach out to you or check out your webpage, what would be the best way to find you?
So I have on Twitter, I'm just my name, which is Kat Cressida, Kat with a K, Cressida with a C. If you Google it, it'll pop up. And I have a Wikipedia page that people often land on first, and then it takes them to my Twitter. So that's my Twitter, and then Instagram is same, Kat Cressida, and then Facebook, it just has a dot between the Kat and the Cressida, so that you get to my actual page where I post things to. And I have a speaker's site as well, which goes more into detail about the specifics of my journey and has a bunch of cool interviews and the TED Talk, and that's KatCressidaSpeaks, all one word.com. Which is different from katcressida.com, which is my voiceover site. And I welcome, you know, people. I always engage, and I welcome anybody shouting out or asking questions. Always happy to try to respond, and I'm grateful that when the world normalizes, I'll be back to doing the public speaking and the patient advocacy on behalf of all of you. You haven't asked me this, so I guess I'll address it, but my hidden disability, which someone mentioned at the beginning, that I have my own hidden disability, are the post-traumatic stress symptoms that one faces coming out of all this, because the physical healing was one thing, and that of course was the immediate concern. I'm very convinced that there should have been more things happening to address the mental side of it while I was going through it. In a sense, there was sort of this, and I think most surgeons are like this. Their job is to get in there and fix the physical, right? They're not licensed therapists. I wish that I had been forced into or heavily encouraged to be going through trauma therapy or some version of therapy while I was going through the physical, both so that I would have a safe place to share all my fears,
Both.
to share all of my feelings and fears in real time, not just with friends and family and caretakers and doctors, but with someone who was completely objective and neutral in terms of just being there to offer support and an emotional TLC, but also to be addressing the traumas that I think so often, not every cancer journey or illness journey, of course, resembles mine, thank God. And I've had plenty of relatives and friends go through cancer surgeries that didn't resemble this at all. They had their treatments, and eventually they were, if not completely good as new, at least healthy and in remission and able to move forward. Mine was a much steeper curve on all fronts. And you naturally, of course, come through, if you've gone through major trauma, you come out of it with post-traumatic stress. I mean, that's almost a guarantee. But nobody talks about that, or at least in my world, nobody said, hey, you're going to have PTSD on the back end of this. So start looking for a really good therapist or three.
I think people are a little bit apprehensive or scared too, because in the beginning of getting like a serious diagnosis like this, I know all of us have gone through misdiagnosis and it's all in your head, and their go-to is that, you know, maybe it's psychological. I know with my heart issues, I was misdiagnosed with panic disorder, and so I think that can be a struggle sometimes with addressing the mental health aspect, because you shut it away in the beginning when that's their go-to, because they can't figure out, you know, what the actual diagnosis is. And so
Well,
I think it's a good point to bring that up.
That should be a reason that you actually do seek out a specialist. Because if a doctor who's not a psychologist or a therapist is telling you that it's all in your head, the first person who's going to be able to negate that is a psychologist. I remember asking one therapist, probably 2 years out of it, maybe 3 years out of it, do you think that I'm clinically depressed? Do you think that I'm technically depressed? Because obviously, naturally, I was sad a lot, and certainly wasn't smiling or laughing all that much. I didn't find my laugh until 2017, a full 4 years out of everything. There was so much that I had to go through, and I had surgeries every year to follow up with. And then, of course, all the medical healthcare, health insurance issues that came up as a part of this all being in my face. There was not a lot of things to laugh about or smile about for the first few years. And I mean, there was a lot to be grateful for, but that's a different emotion from happy. So I had one therapist say, I don't think that you're clinically depressed. I think that you naturally have circumstantial depression, which makes total sense. Your circumstances are creating a sense of heaviness and all the things that someone who's clinically depressed experiences all the time, or a lot of the time, because of chemical imbalance. I was experiencing because of the circumstances, which makes total sense. It's a grieving. If you lose someone that's close to you, of course you're depressed, whether it's, a bad breakup, or someone that you were close with who moves far away, or a pet that passes away. These are all things that will momentarily put you into circumstantial depression. It's just so obvious that it makes me laugh that we don't use that term more. And it's great that she did that, because she didn't throw me on meds or anything. She simply said, you're understandably depressed, and you will eventually come out of it as you continue to heal. Most likely, is what she said. Most likely you will come out of it. So I would say to everybody, if what you're getting is some person in a white lab coat or with several degrees behind them saying, this is most likely all in your head or psychosomatic, or you're exaggerating it, I would say the first thing you'd want to go is go to someone who specializes in the nugget and therapy and say, okay, I've got serious pains in my XYZ and I'm experiencing XYZ and I feel this way, that way physically. Do you think that that's psychosomatic? Any good therapist is most likely going to say, I would get a second or third opinion medically because I think that there's something there that's real. I guess I've been lucky. I've had all therapists who were straight shooters because that's what I insist on. And none of them would waste their time trying to fix something up here that they suspect is going on somewhere else, if that helps answer that for you. And anybody who's gone through serious surgeries, you may not have gone through trauma. There's a difference between a traumatic, a surgery that causes trauma, although I think they're all on some level traumatic. I think anytime you're in a hospital with tubes in you, it's frightening. But true trauma, just to clarify, is defined as something that lifts you out of yourself and you no longer feel a connection to yourself or your life. And there's all kinds of events that can slam someone down with trauma. But if you've experienced trauma, you most likely have post-traumatic stress syndromes, whether it's anxiety, depression, all the emotions that are attached to feeling useless, helpless, out of control, not in control. Those are all things that are part of PTSD. And I certainly work very hard to keep the lens as clear as I can. If something is upsetting, to remind myself that it's certainly nothing like what I went through before, and that it may just be a temporary panic attack or a slight anxiety attack, but that just take a couple of deep breaths and reset, or disengage from a conversation and come back to it when you're feeling less emotionally charged about it. An oversensitivity is very natural coming out of heavy surgery. The joke that I make, or the analogy I make a lot when I'm keynote speaking or describing it, is that from the age of awareness, let's say that's 2 or 3, that we in America become aware that we're separate from other people, that we have this sort of self-awareness that we are me and everybody else is them, whether it's mom or dad or siblings. If that makes any sense, from that moment on, we start to build up a protective layer or 20. We start to learn how to keep our emotions to ourselves. We learn when to express and when not to. Some of us overlearn that lesson and are far more reticent to speak up. And I guess where I'm going with this is we build up this protective shield, and it's what allows us to feel safer and not always feeling everything. Once you go into a deep surgery like that and come out of it, it's stripped from you. Your armor's kind of ripped away from you. And I'm not sure what that's about, other than the fact that being mentally under, you kind of come out of it almost as if you're, I want to use the right term, but you're sort of, everything's fresh and new again. It took me a long time to relearn everything, even my own emotions, and to recognize, for everything to reset. It doesn't just reboot immediately like a computer and boom, it's good as new. It takes a long time for it all to reset. And therefore, all the protective shields are down, so I'm much more sensitive to everything. Not that I have any superpowers because of it, but I wish I had spidey sense. But I'm definitely much more aware of things and emotions coming at me or coming from me. So that's also part of it, is learning how to just take a deep breath and go, okay, you're very raw and you're feeling everything, but it's okay, and it'll settle. So I think that's my answer to you of the hidden disabilities that I think naturally people experience, but maybe don't address or don't have them addressed coming out of any serious traumatic event. And if one is experiencing a long round of hidden disabilities, I would assume there's some amount of that oversensitivity, I would guess.
How about you, Amber? Do you have any other questions?
No, she answered everything great. It was such a pleasure talking to you today, Kat. Like, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us your story and,
for being an advocate for advocacy. It's something that we, our listeners talk about and we are huge advocates for. So thank you so much for
Great what you guys are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we are grateful that you were able to come on the show, and we want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen. And we ask that you give us a 5-star review so that other Spoonies and those with invisible illnesses can find our podcast. You can visit us on the web at theinvisibleidiaries.com or find us on our social media platforms at The Invisible Diaries. Feel free to message us or request upcoming podcast topics. We're always here for our community, shedding light on invisible illnesses. Yay. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.